Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are here with Austin from Ohio, and today is Sunday, September 5th, 2021. As promised, I am making this video today for you guys, and we're just going to go over a couple news articles here that I got pulled up, and we'll probably be finishing out the video with the article that I've been reading, the last couple videos. I call it How It All Ties In, and we're just going to continue reading that one because it's pretty important in my opinion. A lot is going on. I mean, you guys know, I know, most people don't, though, and that is a problem. Most people are just, going about their day, not paying attention to anything at all, just going along to get along. And as history has shown, going along to get along is how you end up with, things like this. And this is exactly the reason why I am choosing to not have children. I will not be bringing a child into this new world order. It's bad enough that I have to be here, as I've said before. And we knew they were going to go after the kids. We knew that they were going to go after the kids to get to the parents. And they want the kids anyway, because that's just, that's what totalitarian governments do. They want to own the youth, control the youth, so they can control the future of the country. Hitler understood that. Stalin understood that. Mussolini, Pol Pot, King Leopold, it doesn't matter who. And they're playing the same game that they always have played throughout history. Most people can't see it. They don't see the signs of totalitarianism in our country today and around the world. The problem is, this time, it's the entire world and not just a single country here, there, whatever. It's the entire world. Alright, this first one is from Fox News. Our friends over on the right side of the propaganda machine. Can parents lose custody of children if they don't get the C-19 mark? This is what they do when they try to form public opinion. This is what they do when they want to turn the public's mind onto something. This right here. I'm sure if you go to the comments on this news story, there will be a lot of people on there that were good little boys and girls that went and got their thing, and they will be on there telling you, yes, they should, which is terrible, disgusting, absolutely horrid. Attorneys agree that if a child is immunocompromised, a judge may order a parent to get marked if the issue is presented at court. And you know where this is going. A report out of Chicago last week about a judge ordering a mother to temporarily lose custody of her son for refusing to get the C-19 mark, and then reversing his decision as some parents questioning the possibility of such a ruling. It should. Rebecca Furlett told Fox 32 Chicago last week that Cook County Judge James Shapiro revoked all of her parenting time with her son until she gets marked. Quote, he was placing his views on me and taking my son away from me, Furlett said of Shapiro. Furlett, who's reportedly been divorced for 7 years and shares custody of her son with her ex-husband, said she does not want to get the mark due to previous adverse reactions to marks, according to Fox 32. Shouldn't even need a reason, just you don't want it. This is supposed to be the United States of America. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to at all, whatsoever, regardless of what the majority says. If 329,999,999 people said that you had to jump off a bridge, would you do it? Our parents used to tell us that, but now our parents are the ones going and doing what everybody else is doing. So, bunch of hypocrites nowadays. Everybody seems to be a hypocrite. Shapiro, however, reversed his decision on Monday after it gained traction in the media, leaving some parents wondering whether it's possible for parents to lose custody of their children if they refuse to get the mark. This is where this is going. They will make it to where you have to if you want to. And this is messed up because the state should not ever be involved in family matters. Ever. The state, no matter what country, has always shown that they are not in your best interest. And history shows that those who, try to force things on other people aren't the good guys. So, what is going on? Everything is literally backwards, as it says in scriptures. Fox News spoke to several family law attorneys who agree that if a child is immunocompromised, the judge presiding over a custody battle may order a parent to get marked if the issue is properly presented at court. Joran Jenkins, a family lawyer in private practice at Open Palm Law in Florida, pointed to 3 reasons a judge may require parents to receive a C-19 mark in divorce court. First, a parent would have to properly bring the issue before the court. Second, now, see what that said? You see what that said, talking about divorce court. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have went through divorces. I never have, so I can't speak on this. I mean, I know it's very common, very, very commonplace now in 21st century America. But usually these things are, a literal battle going at the throat of the other parent, especially in the early on stages of a divorce before, they accept that each other are better off without the other. At least from what I've seen. But then again, I've never went through this. So, if one parent doesn't want this thing, and the other parent wants to go to court to present to a judge or whoever that they don't want their kid around this person because they aren't marked, you bet that judge will be siding with the person who is marked, especially in this day and age. Okay, so first, the parent would have to properly bring the issue before the court. Second, the child may have pre-existing conditions that would put him or her at risk of getting a severe C-19 infection if living with unmarked parents. Third, the court acts in the best interest of the child, and if requiring parents to get marked is in the child's best interest, a judge may order parents to get the mark. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? Still, Jenkins described Shapiro as a maverick in his decision because the subject of the mark was not brought to the court by either Furlet or her ex-husband. Morgan Richardson, a matrimonial law partner at Davidoff, Hutcher, and Citron, also noted that Furlet said she was reactive to marks and had medical reason not to get the mark. Judges can only decide issues that are brought before the court and brought before the court in a certain way. Jenkins told Fox News to basically deny this gal due process, which is deep down a constitutional issue. She had no idea this was going to be something they'd be talking about, so she wasn't prepared. And yes, it is a deep down constitutional issue. This whole thing is unconstitutional. This whole thing is unlawful. Everything they did in the past 19 months is unlawful. They literally unweaved the fabric of our very culture and society. And they have to do that because you have to get rid of the United States if you want a one-world government. Because, we're the people who are supposed to be freedom-loving and, whatever. She mentioned a case in New Jersey that was my brother. Sorry about that. She mentioned a case in New Jersey in last August which 2 parents fought over whether their child should get marked. And the court ultimately decided that the mother was not credible in her argument against her son getting marked. And the judge determined that it was in the best interest of the child to get marked based on the father's reasoning. So he did. Assuming no laws are in place requiring either parent or child to get the mark, the judge then determines what arguments parents have either for or against getting the mark. Judge may ask whether the parents or child are immunocompromised, whether the child attends public school and sees lots of other kids, whether the child has siblings, or if those siblings are immunocompromised, whether parents are reactive to marks, and so on. Jenkins explained. So they're literally giving judges all this power in order to, and this, the way things work is, even though this judge reversed his decision, yeah, okay, good, that's a good thing. Very good thing. That was the right thing to do. Whether he did it off of his own volition or if he was pressured into doing that, it was the right thing to do. Let me see if I'm still recording. Okay, we're good. But what this does is it sets a precedent. And you know how those precedents go. It could be any other situation. It doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, parents going through divorce and one parent comes in and tries to say this or whatever. It could literally be if you get arrested for something stupid, which we all know that getting arrested nowadays doesn't really make you a terrible person because so many things are illegal on purpose in order for the prison industrial complex to, fill up their prisons and to, further the totalitarianism in our society. Let's say you get arrested. Let's say it's this time next year. You get arrested. You have a child. Judge finds out that you don't have whatever. Now the judge can say, oh, well, there was that case last year, even though the judge reversed his decision, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to say that you can't see your child until you get marked. This is what they will do. They have always held children over the parents' heads. Always. And this one basically just goes on. I would say that's unconstitutional, truthfully, but I just think it's the way the trial courts are not really going to get into their constitutionality issues associated with it. Caller, instead of requiring parents to get marked. Then you have the public policy considerations. I don't think the trial courts are going to get involved unless the child is being somehow subjected to unnecessarily to risk associated with parent being marked or unmarked. Now we have the breakthrough cases. That's what they call them. So if that type of fatal situation is created, then I could see how a court may step in and modify custody, at least temporarily, just to protect the child. So even these lawyers are, making excuses and saying, well, if this happens or if that happens, I can see where, no, if you're a decent lawyer, a real constitutional freedom-loving lawyer, you should be up in arms against all of this. Now, check this out. He had that a judge may consider requiring a parent to get marked if they're exposing their child to a situation that puts a child at risk for contracting the mystery, especially if infection presents medical risk for a child. Richardson believes courts will absolutely see the C19 mark create situations where one parent refuses to allow a mark once it's approved for children under 12. Once it's approved for children under 12, meaning that it will be. Those parents, she said, will most likely lose that fight. Yes. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And they always bring up, oh, what about the other vaccinations and this and that? No. This is completely different. Yes, the other ones had their problems. We can go back and forth all day on that. But we all know that this one is different. Now check this out. Most courts are following the advancement of science and the protection of public health. Unless there's a compelling reason not to get a child marked, the fight ends with a shot. Those of you who have children, are you not pissed off about this? Seriously, you should be. This is the definition of tyranny. No other way to put it. And most courts following the advancement of science and the protection of public health. Okay, let me tell you something about the protection of public health. Saw a video today where this mother, well, soon to be mother, she was going for a checkup or something to be seen because she's high risk pregnancy, all this stuff. She's like 6 or 7 months into the pregnancy, so pretty far along. They found out that she was not marked or her other child, so she was not allowed to be seen. A high-risk mother who could lose the baby at any minute cannot be seen for something that she needed to be seen for because she didn't have a mark. That doesn't sound like protecting public health to me. That sounds like you're stifling public health and just trying to get people to take this thing. If it was really about public health and they cared so much about public health, they would have seen that mother. And I'm sure there's a lot of other situations going on where that is a reality. You know, pretty soon those of us who are unmarked are not going to be able to go into a hospital because they're going to say, "Oh, now you have to have this or you can't go in." Most people will agree with it. "Oh, just go get it and then you don't have to worry about it." That's the type of environment that they are creating. Really just wanted to bring this first one up just to show that this is the route that they're going. They are going to use your children against you. We all have seen it coming. We all have seen this coming. Never thought that it would be here so quickly, but we've all seen it coming. Moving on. Okay, I normally don't like to bring up Blaze for obvious reasons, but I thought this one was rather important. Check this out. Fauci says, block, cancel. Fauci says third dose likely necessary in order for Americans to enjoy the privileges of the freedoms of being fully marked. Okay. Let me get rid of these pop-ups before it crashes my thing. Okay, so he's saying that the third dose is likely necessary in order for Americans to enjoy the privileges of the freedoms of being fully marked. The privileges of the freedoms? That's not freedom if you have to get something that they want you to get in order to take part in society. That's not freedom. And we could expect this from somebody like him. This guy is a Jesuit. This guy is a Mason. This guy is all the things that you don't want in a NIAID director. Remember when he walked in last year in that interview and he put his hand in his jacket, letting people know that he was a Mason? Yeah, that's how Masons talk to each other or greet each other. It's insane. So this guy is still going on about this. All right, infectious disease expert and White House chief medical advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci said Thursday that he would not be at all surprised if the recommended full regimen for the 2-shot C-19 marks in the U.S. became 3 doses instead of 2, according to CNBC. Well, and it'll soon be, it needs to be 5 instead of 4, 10 instead of 8, 20 instead of 18. Where does it end? Answer, it doesn't. During a Thursday White House press briefing on the coronavirus situation, Fauci was asked if he believed the U.S. would follow Israel's example and require people to receive a third dose of either Moderna or Pfizer BioNTech mark in order to be considered fully marked. Zeke Miller with the Associated Press asked Fauci, quote, "You mentioned the studies in Israel. We've seen the Israeli government require people to get a third dose of the mark to be considered fully marked. Do you expect a similar change in the United States that, if the third dose after the 8-month waiting period will be required to be, quote unquote, considered fully marked and enjoy privileges of the freedoms that it provides?" I can't get over that wording. Privileges of the freedoms. Come on. Fauci responded, quote, "The determination whether something is now constitute fully marked, I will leave that up to the FDA when they get the data on the 3 doses to make that determination. Then ultimately a recommendation from the ACIP to the CDC so that it's recommended." Of course, your pals over at the FDA and the CDC. Come on, man. But I must say, he continued, "from my own experience as an immunologist, I would not at all be surprised that the adequate full regimen for the mark will likely be 3 doses. And the reason I say that is very clear. When you give a prime and maybe a second shot as a boost, but give the immune system enough chance to mature and both affinity maturation and maturation of the B cell repertoire, it is entirely understandable why the results that I've reported from the Israeli boosters are so dramatic. Fauci, who's also the director of NIAID, added that he would leave it up to U.S. Food and Drug Administration to ultimately determine the composition of a full regimen, but said that he personally believes that 3 doses rather than 2 would likely provide a more durable response. This is going to make a whole mess. A whole mess. What if people that already went out and got their first and second one, what if they don't want the third one? Then they're going to be just like us. Look what happened to the nurses and doctors. Last year, they were the heroes, right? On the front lines, fighting this so we could be safe, right? Now look, they turned on them. Now they're terrible. This is what they do. Whatever group is being favored right now won't say a word until they are on the receiving end. Which you will be. If you're in a group right now that's being favored by the state, you will be on this side soon enough. Don't you worry about that. Fauci added, quote, "We all hope and I believe that we have a good reason to believe that only will not be a strong response, but that it will actually be durable. And if it is durable, then you're going to have very likely 3-dose regimen being the routine regimen. We'll just have to wait to make sure that's the case when the data get presented to the FDA." And that's basically just it. That's basically just the whole thing there. So they're already setting it up where they're talking about a third one, and then we're going to see a 4th, 5th, 6th, because it's never going to end. They're going to poke and prod you until who knows what. Most people are just keeping it quiet, letting it go, just doing what they're told, not speaking out. It's crazy. It's insane. Let's move on. I always love when other countries' news gets involved in what we do over here. Check this one out. Official China news agency demands America disarm its citizens. Remember a couple years ago when the Chinese government was telling our government that they need to disarm U.S. citizens? A Chinese news agency newspaper seems unduly interested in the debate over gun control and gun violence in the U.S., and it's regularly printing articles calling for citizen disarmament. One might think this is merely a chance to tweak our nose, but with recent Chinese saber rattling, it would be wise for us to consider why this would be so important to Chinese citizens. U.S. citizens almost never consider the domestic policies of Chinese citizens, or for that matter, almost any citizens of another country. We typically do not have enough information to have an informed opinion, nor can we have an actual impact on domestic policy in other countries, so we are just not that into foreign domestic policy. Okay, well, before I go speaking, I will read this next part. Recent activities and proposals in the UN have been designed to reach into the domestic policies of sovereign countries and to impact their laws and statutes. That's especially true with regard to gun purchases, ownership, and policy. The UN has been seeking ways to insert itself into the gun control debate and to somehow assume legal control of some of the policies in trade regarding gun purchases and ownership, now wholly assumed by the U.S. Those that would allow outside influences to dictate how we run our country is yet another indication of dishonest bureaucrats willing to bargain away our sovereignty and hand it over to the one-worlders. Absolutely true. Why do you think, not just China, but why do you think all of these big names and the UN and all that, why do you think they want us to disarm? You think they care about, quote, gun violence? You think they care about, people being safe and all this? No, they want to disarm you so you can be taken over. You cannot successfully march in a country with 300 plus million armed people. It cannot happen. Well, unless there's 300 plus million people aren't willing to fight. But I just thought it was awfully funny that China's coming on their news and demanding that America disarm us. They have not been successful at that, and I don't think that they, well, honestly, I don't know now because everything is so sophisticated, multifaceted, that they might not even have to do that. They might have found a way around it instead of, fighting with us back and forth all day about whether we should have protection for our families or not. So, it's just one of those things. Anybody that attempts to disarm is not your friend at all whatsoever. And we know that is one of the goals of the New World Order, is to control and seize all conventional weapons and small arms from all people of the world. They've already done it in a few other countries. They need to do it here. We cannot let this happen. We have to keep our eye on this. This is just something that's incredibly, incredibly important. The founders knew what they were doing when they, outlined in the Constitution that we have a right to keep and bear arms. All human beings have the right to protect themselves. It is common sense. Let's move on. All right, here we are over at the Communist News Network. And New Orleans is transporting some residents to shelters as hundreds of thousands remain without power after Hurricane Ida. Shelters, huh? Where have we heard that before? Huh. Take what you will from this article, but I'm going to go ahead and start reading. As hundreds of thousands of Louisiana residents struggle in sweltering conditions without power 6 days after deadly Hurricane Ida struck, some are trying their luck elsewhere. New Orleans on Saturday started a shuttle program for... What's going on? Shuttle program for electricity-deprived residents wanting to leave, sending them by charter bus from the City Convention Center to powered shelters in northern Louisiana and Texas. Quote, "I've had enough," a New Orleans resident who gave his name only as Kerry told CNN on Saturday before boarding one of the buses. His multi-story apartment building in New Orleans, like much of the city, has been without power since the storm hit. Elevator service is out, and arthritis in his leg makes navigating stairs difficult. "I'm looking forward to just a clean bath and to be cool, It's too hot," Kerry told CNN's Nadia Romero. That's absolutely sad. And this is what they do. This is exactly what they do. They promise you all these things, but what do you want to bet that the conditions are not going to be like that whenever this man gets to where he's going? And they knew that, being without power would cause people to want to be displaced. Of course. This is very, very weird. What's this trailer that we're looking at here? This is odd. I don't even know how to get rid of it. That looks like some predictive programming stuff I might want to look into, but anyway. Around 700,000 homes and businesses in Louisiana were without power as of early Thursday afternoon, according to PowerOutage.us. And people who are sticking around are enduring long lines outside gas stations and aid distribution sites in a battle to stay cool and mobile. In the wind-damaged city of Kenner, near New Orleans, the mayor was blunt Saturday when asked what his city needed the most. Power. Mayor Ben Zahn told CNN, "We suffered a lot. When you don't have power, you need ice. So we have been trying to give as much ice out as we can because people need to keep things as cold as possible." What do you think it's going to be like when the power goes out on a major scale, like in a couple states or whatever? What do you think it's going to be like then? A lot of displaced people, and do you think they have the shelters already up and running? Well, of course they do. They've been having that going on. So I just don't understand why it's so hard for people to see what's going on. We've been talking about FEMA camps for a long time. A long time. This is what they do. They displace people. They put them into FEMA camps. What happened to all the homeless people out in California? Remember one day they were just gone? just gone. All their stuff was gone. They were gone. Everybody was gone. What's going on? High temperatures will be in the 80s or low 90s in southeast Louisiana and southern Mississippi on Saturday, with the heat index, what the temperature feels like with humidity and other factors, generally in the mid-90s, the forecasters said. Entergy Louisiana, which provides electric service to more than 1 million customers, has estimated that power will be restored to the vast majority of its customers by Wednesday. Didn't that look like a city without power right there? And in the new trailer for that show that's called 911, which that's already weird, it shows it's called 911 Blackout. And all these cities, well, this one city on there was going through a blackout. So predictive programming is off the charts. They're literally telling you that they plan on cutting the power, at least to the major cities. Oh man, it's going to get crazy. And basically, many gas stations inoperable, don't have fuel. People waiting outside them for hours. Many want gas to fuel their vehicles. Some drive out of the region, and some just use their cars as air-conditioned places to rest. Others want to fuel their home generators to keep electricity going. Yeah, so it causes a whole lot of problems when, electricity goes out. On purpose, because that's the environment that they've created. They've made us dependent on electricity. They've made us dependent on all of this stuff. So, we act this way whenever these things aren't used or cannot be used. It is really, really, really picking up. And they basically just go on about that whole thing. Blah, 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 blah. And then, I'm just wondering where the help is. So basically they're saying that, the government's not helping, and the same rhetoric that we saw during Hurricane Katrina. No air conditioning, no lights. I had C last year, ICU 14 days. On oxygen treatments now, and I have no electricity. It's rough. Yes, this is part of all of it. This is the weather warfare. This is the war of attrition. This is just all of it. Everything that we've been talking about. But I'm going to go ahead and move on. Yeah, but that last one I forgot to say at the end. So people are going into the, quote, shelters, and it's probably not going to be a good thing. We'll have to keep our eye on that as well. So if you know anybody who plans on going to one of these shelters or live down in New Orleans, please stay in contact with them and let me know what comes of that. I will, if I remember, I will link my email in the pinned comments so you guys can email me whatever you have. But check this one out. Board of Supervisors in California becomes first in the nation to declare C-19 misinformation a public health crisis. Okay, so C-19, quote, misinformation is now a public health crisis. They're going to do everything with the public health stuff. Pretty soon, guns are going to be a public health crisis. Cars, gas-powered engines, prepping, food storage, water storage. Everything's a public health crisis. And I remember when I first started making videos, I would always say they were going to go that route. If they say that something is a public health crisis, they can skirt so many laws, which we've seen that they've been doing. Because everything is codes and regulations. A divided San Diego County Board of Supervisors has voted to adopt what is believed to be a first-in-the-nation policy of declaring C-19 misinformation a public health crisis and adopt a series of recommendations to actively combat it. Quote, combating health misinformation needs to start on the ground in counties and cities across our nation, said Board Chairman Nathan Fletcher, who authored the policy. San Diego County took the first step of becoming the first local jurisdiction in the country to align its policies with the U.S. Surgeon General's recommendations to fight health misinformation. Health misinformation is a national crisis, and it requires all of us to fight against it together. Tuesday night's vote was 3-2, with Supervisors Jim Desmond and Joel Anderson voting no. The final result came after hours of debate featuring testimony from hundreds of residents, many who opposed the measure. Fletcher characterized them as mostly right-wing anti-vaxxers. That's what it is. Everybody is a right-wing anti-vaxxer now. You don't have to be labeled as anything. What if you just believe in, free speech? Who decides what the misinformation is and what it's not? A lot of people have had their stuff taken down for misinformation that were absolutely true. Very dangerous times we're in. Okay, so according to San Diego County public health officials, the policy comes 83.7% of the county's C19 cases are amongst people who are not fully marked against the situation. Since March 2021, 96.7% of the hospitalizations in San Diego County related to C19 have involved people who are not fully marked. The county added the vote came hours after much public testimony from people who oppose C19 marks and face masks. That's misinformation right there. We know they lie on their statistics. I mean, come on, it's not that hard. It's not that hard at all to see that these people are a bunch of liars. Anything that goes against what they're saying is now going to be, has been, misinformation according to them. We're really going to have to do something. I don't know what, but we're going to have to do something. Really going to have to start, actually digging things up and make sure that we prove our points. But even if we do that and we have actual documentation, they'll just say, nah, that's not real documentation. Experts said, guys. You need to just get over it. Experts said. Come on, man. Come on. Get out of here. Moving on. Alright, here's something that we have to watch as well. Fed could soon lose control of inflation like in the 1960s, economic historian says. Of course, they can't even control inflation in the first place. This whole system was meant to be inflation, it was meant for inflation. That's the entire point of all of this, especially during this time in this war that they have obviously declared on us. Prominent economic historian Niall Ferguson said current inflation could be in line with where it was in the 1960s, during the period that preceded the decade of high consumer prices, CNBC reported. Oh, look at this crap. Quote, what is interesting about disasters is that one can lead to another, Ferguson said in a Friday interview with CNBC. You can go from a public health disaster to a physical, monetary, and potentially inflationary disaster. That's part of the plan, yes, of course, and the collapse of most businesses and the total destruction of all small businesses, but yeah. All they need is the right major crisis and the nations will accept a new world order. That's where we are. During the 1960s, inflation stayed low before shooting up in the 1970s, according to government economic data. Consumer prices ultimately peaked in 1980 before rapidly declining. The Consumer Price Index, a common tool for measuring inflation, surged 4.2% between August 2020 and July 2021. The Department of Labor reported that figure represented the highest 12-month consumer price increase since 1991, another period of significant inflation. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell repeatedly said that increased prices hitting Americans are transitory. Other top officials in the central bank, though, have recently started pushing back on this view, saying there's evidence inflation may be around for longer than previously expected. Well, yeah, because they're trying to get you to accept that, one world digital currency. If they make a move like this, they can drop the dollar. Because they could say, oh, well, we can get away from all of this, and all we have to do is just get a whole new system. Oh, we already have one ready to go. Look how that worked out. How long is transitory, asked Ferguson, according to CNBC. At what point do expectations fundamentally shift, especially if the Federal Reserve is telling people We have changed our inflation targeting regime. We don't mind if inflation goes above target for a while. Quote, my sense is that we are not heading for the 1970s, but we could be rerunning the late 1960s, when famously the Fed chair then, McChesney Martin, lost control of inflation expectations. He continued. Former Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers, who has warned of high inflation since the beginning of the year, said this week that inflation could grow even higher as prices of homes continue to rise. Home prices are more than 41% higher than their previous peak recorded in 2006, a major industry report showed on Tuesday. Every time you hear that inflation is transitory, remember that double house price inflation hasn't yet shown up in the indexes. Summers tweeted, housing represents 40% of the core CPI. Yeah, why do you think the government took control of housing after the housing crisis? And then they took control of the healthcare industry. It's so they can play this game that they're playing right now. And we're seeing it. We're seeing the culmination of all of it. Literally. The housing crisis right at the beginning of Obama's presidency, boom, bailed out by the government. Now the government controls housing. Obamacare allowed the government to nationalize the healthcare industry. Now we are seeing all of it play out and why they did it. But, keep watching TV, Americans. Keep burying your head in the sand. Keep exposing yourself to poisons and keep getting dumber over time. I'm sure it'll all just pass, right, guys? This will all just pass over. There's no new world order. There's no one world government. Let's move on. Okay, for those of you who have been here, and for those of you who watch all my videos, we are going to continue reading this here, which is, I title it How It All Ties In, but this is basically just all these high-level meetings that took place before the situation and all of that, and it kind of just puts it all into perspective, and that's why I call it How It All Ties In, because this is literally how it all ties in. And we ended right up here after this long paragraph, so I'm going to continue here. If you want to watch the first parts when I was reading this, there's a How It All Ties In Part 1 and Part 2 in the title of the videos, and you could fast forward to the end of the video to where I'm reading this, just so you can catch up with it, or if you've been here, you already know what has been read. So we'll start from here. It is clear that stakeholder capitalists had accepted that the existing IMFS was finished prior to the global situation. Therefore, BlackRock proposed another solution. They recommended that an investment management firm, BlackRock for example, should be put in charge of hoovering up speculative securities and derivatives on behalf of governments. This could be done by bypassing all risk analysis, allowing central banks to purchase huge volumes of junk assets to fund government policy directly. In doing so, BlackRock were suggesting that government fiscal policy should be controlled by central bank monetary policy. They were effectively establishing a system of central bank control of government policy. They called this going direct. BlackRock said that going direct would only be required in the event of unusual condition arising from unusual circumstances. While the unusual condition will require a permanent setup, going direct would only be used temporarily. Once fiscal policy objectives were achieved, which under their plan would also be monetary policy objectives, the temporary permanent setup could then move to an exit strategy placed on the policy horizon. They literally had it all set up before this whole thing. They knew what they were going to do. Too big to fail, again. Just 1 month later, those unusual conditions arose with the collapse of the repurchase agreement market in the U.S. Repurchase agreements are short-term loans, typically overnight, where bond dealers offer primarily government bonds to investors with an agreement to repurchase them at a higher price the next day. This marginal difference is the repo rate. The repo market enables corporations and other bondholders to raise capital quickly. Investors can make swift profit, and as the market mainly consists of safe securities, government bonds, the repo market is usually considered stable. It is a vital component of the interbank lending system, where banks exchange central bank reserves to settle payments and move capital. The repo rate is generally around 2%, but on September 7, 2019, the U.S. repo market ground to a halt, forcing those holding treasuries to raise the rate to 10% in one day. Despite this far more attractive rate, investors still didn't enter the repo market They should have jumped at the chance to make a quick killing from the hiked repo rate, but they didn't. When the repo market crashed, just four U.S. banking giants, J.P. Morgan Chase and Company, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Citibank, held 25% of Fed reserves and 50% of U.S. Treasuries, the government bonds between them. Their liquid assets were heavily skewed towards Treasuries. In their 2019 fourth quarterly report, the Bank for International Settlements, BIS, explained why this was a serious problem. Quote, repo markets redistribute liquidity between financial institutions, not only banks but also insurance companies, asset managers, money market funds, and other institutional investors. In so doing, they help other financial markets to function smoothly. Thus, any sustained disruption in this market could quickly ripple through the financial system. The freezing up of repo markets in late 2008 was one of the most damaging aspects of the Great Financial Crisis. The four largest U.S. banks specifically turned into key players. Their net lending position increased quickly, reaching about $300 billion at the end of June 2019. At the same time, the next largest 25 banks reduced their demand for repo funding. Swings in reserves are likely to have reduced the cash buffers of the big four banks and their willingness to lend into the repo market. The BIS recognized that years of quantitative easing, virtual money printing, following the 2008 financial crash had provided so much liquidity to U.S. commercial banks that they had less need to use the repo market. At the same time, the biggest financial institutions were holding so many treasuries that they were at risk of becoming their own customers. Far from being stable investments, U.S. treasuries were looking distinctly shaky. This provided further disincentive to prospective repo market investors. In addition, with so many reserves, fluctuation at the base rate made the biggest banks' cash flows unstable. The BIS noted that for these too big to fail banks, their ability to supply funding at short notice in repo markets was diminished. They added that this was an underlying structural factor that could have amplified the repo rate reaction. The BIS then claimed that the Fed had claimed markets by embarking upon yet more QE, money creation, which is quantitative easing. It's literally, that's what they call money creation, which is when they print money from thin air, as they've been doing, as they purchased the treasuries from the banking giants, clogging up the system. The financial mainstream media remained all but silent as the Fed pumped $6 trillion into Wall Street. The interbank lending system was seizing up again, just as it had in 2007, directly funding governments. BlackRock's Going Direct plan, presented to the G7 in August 2019, started to take effect in September 2019. Isn't that fun? Now notice that this is all before even Event 201, with the collapse of the repo market. Just a few months later, when the WHO declared the global situation, the economic conditions and circumstances became even more unusual. BlackRock explained how Going Direct enabled the economic response to the global situation. The future evolution and global spread of the situation outbreak is highly uncertain. Containment and social distancing are ultimately achieved by reducing economic activity. This requires a decisive, preemptive, and coordinated policy response. A comprehensive global response should have the following elements: generous sick pay support and short-time work schemes to stabilize incomes and limit job losses. Expanding funding for lending facilities. Monetary policy should focus on preventing an unwarranted tightening on financial conditions and ensure the functioning of financial markets. By going direct, central banks across the world, including the BOE, have engaged in unprecedented levels of QE to directly fund government spending during the situation. This plan was devised in August 2019, 7 months before the WHO declared the C-19 crisis. There's currently no sign of an end to what is effectively money creation on an unimaginable scale. During the 2021 Cornwall G7 summit, and the financial media reported that world leaders had agreed to continue QE, which again is quantitative easing, printing money from thin air. They hadn't agreed to continue anything. That decision was made months earlier by BlackRock and the gathered G7 bankers at Jackson Hole. We must cease our delusions that the political puppets paraded in front of the TV cameras are in charge. They don't control anything. Yes, if you don't know that by now, then nobody can help you. The people with the real power meet in secret. All these big banks, and they meet in these weird locations, and they plot literally the future and the fate of billions of people. In late May 2021, the central bankers of the G7 met again to discuss the new IMFS they were already constructing. Central bank governors joined representatives from the International Monetary Fund, World Bank Group, OECD, Eurogroup, and FSB. Through going direct, the attending G7 government finance ministers were instructed to follow whatever fiscal policies the bankers told them to implement. Following their meeting, the central bankers released their communique to the world. We will continue to work together to ensure a strong, sustainable, there's that word again, balanced and inclusive global recovery that builds back better and greener from the C-19 situation. We emphasize the need to green the global financial system so that financial decisions take climate considerations into account. We commit to improve our climate finance contributions through to 2025, including increasing adaptation finance and finance for nature-based solutions. We also commit to a global minimum tax of at least 15% on a country-by-country basis. BlackRock presented the G7 with the solution they would use in response to the situation. The lockdown policies caused a subsequent collapse of economies and global trade. This deepened the financial crisis that began with the repo failure. Central banks then increased the scale of going direct. QE provided generous sick pay support, and short-time work schemes were used to stabilize incomes and limit job losses. There was never any scientific rationale or public health benefit for the lockdowns. They were designed to create a comprehensive global response to expand funding for lending in order to protect and ensure functioning of financial markets. We now know that BlackRock's exit strategy policy horizon looks like. It's the successful transition to net zero, carbon neutral global economy. The central bankers will decide these sustainable goals have been achieved, and until then, they're going direct and are firmly in charge of everything. In January 2020, just as the situation was building, the World Economic Forum published their metrics for sustainable value creation. This established the SDG criteria, which all investment assets will be rated. Any business that needs to raise capital will have to meet these requirements. They stipulate that the winners in this new IMFS will have the right pivotal people on its board. They will engage with the right stakeholders. Their ethical behavior will meet World Economic Forum approval, and they will be able to afford the necessary carbon offsets, other climate change adaptations. In March 2020, as the situation was declared, the World Economic Forum combined their sustainable metrics into an environmental, social, and governance score. The World Economic Forum stated, in light of mounting evidence, activism, and regulation, investors are including climate considerations in their investment decision-making. For example, a group of investors managing $118 trillion in assets now expects companies to provide disclosures in accordance with the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. Do you see how this world government has finally come into view for them? The right crisis just seemed to happen at the right time, right after all of these big meetings and big plans were being laid out. It's really spectacular. And the majority of the world population don't even know that this even happened. They don't know of these large meetings with these bankers. They don't care to know. Because most people, they only get worked up over a political puppet on TV during certain times of the year. And they want their team to win. As long as my team wins, I don't care what happens. The mounting evidence was produced by computer models. The activists were people like Mark Carney, who threatened to make businesses bankrupt unless they compiled regulations were determined by the Financial Stability Board of the BIS. This meant the whole system ultimately came under the control of the Bank for International Settlements. Yes. Global PPP, a great reset. By January 2021, the stakeholder capitalists agreed to, which are fascists. So if I see that word again, I will say fascist. And we already went over the similarities and how it's literally the same exact thing. Just they put a different name on it so people would be like, huh. Well, it says capitalist, so they must be capitalists. Not. Okay, so they agreed to a convergence. ESGs were established as the fascism metrics through a process they called dynamic materiality. The World Economic Forum constructed a mechanism to convert a commitment to sustainable development goals into the basis for a new international monetary financial, I forget what it is. It's the International Monetary Fund. It's the new one that they've been building. Fascism metrics define a sustainable investment as in any company with good ESG rating. As climate change SDGs are underpinned by international agreements, high ESG rated companies are considered safe investments. Unless businesses can gain good ESG rating, they won't survive. Now, the World Economic Forum wished to update their ESG rating with record R for resilience. This typifies how the system is designed to operate. The rating system is arbitrary and entirely under the control of senior partners in the global stakeholder public-private partnership. Only those corporations most adept at jumping through the right hoops at the right time will gain benefit from the ESG. R. Stakeholder capitalism metrics or fascism metrics rating system. It's a winner-take-all game and the prize is tantalizingly close, the World Economic Forum state. ESG, which has become widely used set of metrics, involves analyzing environmental, social, and governance factors when determining which programs, funds, and companies to invest in. With the focus on transformation, the use of ESG frameworks will likely increase many current and nascent businesses or new projects to experience a windfall of incremental investment, both in private capital and by governments around the world. For example, the $1 trillion European Green Deal and the $2 trillion U.S. Sustainable Infrastructure Plan. While it will be the right multinational stakeholder corporations and private investors who profit from the transition to the new carbon-neutral IMFS, the taxpayer is subsidizing it. No wonder they're so eager to combat climate change. In return for this, as pointed out by the Deutsche Bank and others, we can expect our prosperity and employment to suffer considerably. This is starting to look like neo-feudalism. Oh yes, it is getting there. Janet Yellen, former Fed chair and current U.S. Treasury Secretary, laid out how the favored public-private partnership stakeholders will be the financiers of the net zero corporate hegemony. For example, BlackRock already holds $200 billion in sustainable ETF securities. These track the performance of ESG-rated investments, thus driving companies who need capital to commit to SDGs. BlackRock intend to increase their ETF holding by 1 trillion euros, I think that's euros, by 2030. They're committed to their policy of carbon transition readiness. So basically, if your company is not on board with sustainable development, which of course is Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, New World Order, then you're out. You're out. This is supposed to be, America. This is supposed to be where you can create a business if you want to. That was actually the American dream, to have your own business, to take care of your own and be independent of any government or any corporation, any of that. Investors are hoovering up corporate bonds from the ESG high flyers and have already created $17.1 trillion sustainable asset market, with $120 trillion in ESG assets already under the management of financial institutions like BlackRock. This is where investors are heading in the carbon-neutral taxpayer-funded gold rush. This is the capitalization of the carbon bond market that UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak and other political mouthpieces have been so confident about. In order for this $120 trillion bond market to become the basis for a new IMFS, investors need to be strongly encouraged to purchase ESG-rated assets. This process needs to continue at a pace to complete the transformation. To this end, on November 9th, 2020, Sunak announced the UK intended to issue its sovereign green bond. The UK government stated that they would be making TCFD disclosures mandatory for all businesses to encourage investment in new technologies, like stablecoins and central bank digital currencies. The UK government stated, the UK will become the first country in the world to make task force on climate-related financial disclosures. Online disclosures fully mandatory across the economy by 2025. The UK will also implement a green taxonomy, a common framework for determining which activities can be defined as environmentally sustainable. You thought the regulations were bad before? Wait till they start going around and saying that you're not being sustainable. We're going to have to go ahead and fine you into oblivion to where your business fails because you're not sustainable. We're trying to get to a net zero carbon future, and you're here talking about not being sustainable, so you're out. Crazy. The UK government's pretense that it's in control of the process is comical. The fascism metrics, which determine ESG, are asset ratings aren't managed by the UK government. Giant global investment firms like BlackRock and global corporate institutions like World Economic Forum and WBSCD are controlling the investment strategies. Governments are just junior facilitating partners in the global public-private partnership. Yeah, governments have no power if you haven't realized it. The TCFD commitments that they are compelling UK businesses to comply with are controlled by the FSB of the BIS. Not only are the central banks under authority of the BIS going direct and funding global fiscal policy, they are also determining how businesses will be conducted. In effect, thanks to the world situation, they're now in charge of economies around the world. Who we choose to vote for is irrelevant. Fact. Regardless of what you think about the C19, the fact is this: it has presented a global public-private partnership with the perfect opportunity to reset the world economy. The socioeconomic, political, and even cultural changes it has brought dovetail precisely with those we must adopt to transition to the proposed carbon-neutral economy. The opportunity has been seized to use the recovery to surge ahead with the creation of a new IMFS to replace the failing model that was close to complete collapse just months before the situation was declared. For the BIS and the global system of central banks they lead, the situation is the gift that just keeps giving. Not only has it delivered everything we have discussed, but it's enabling them to seize all resources on Earth, control every aspect of our lives through a new monetary system. The new normal is very far from normal, something we will explore soon. And this talks about the Build Back Better, and I believe this is done here. Ooh, I will actually get ready to read this one in the next video. Oh, yeah. This is another one. You know what? We can start it right here. Build Back Better, constructing the New World Order. Another catchy phrase emerges to promote the developing technocracy. Where did it come from? What does it mean? So far, we had a variety of buzzwords and catchphrases coming from world leaders and local council authorities that most readers here will be familiar with. Common purpose, resiliency, sustainability, the list goes on. On the surface, they seem positive and perfectly innocent, but in the context of their usage, the discerning and knowledgeable will recognize the dog-whistling code speak of concerted globalist plan which is being introduced by sly and underhanded methods, in plain, uncoded language, a conspiracy to conspire, of course, to breathe together. There's nothing remotely theoretical about this conspiracy, and it's becoming increasingly bold and transparent as the masses accept with little or no question. The latest phrase to join the list is Build Back Better. You think Biden came up with that? You think he just sat down one day and said, I got it, guys, I got it. Build Back Better. No. His handlers, his bosses, they are the ones who created that phrase. That's reset terminology. That's New World Order terminology. And that's basically what they say there. Build Back Better is ostensibly all about natural disasters, specifically the recovery and rebuild process, and delving into its history connects many loose pieces of the New World Order puzzle. Oh, this is going to be fun. We'll actually stop here, because I'm going to bring this up in the next video. This is very interesting indeed. Let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.